Welcome to another episode of Mindful Endeavors. Today we are joined by the archer Steph. So really quick before I give her the intro, I'm just going to make a quick disclaimer that we're not mental health professionals and we don't necessarily give medical or professional advice, but we do want to keep the conversations going. And if there is anything positive to take from these conversations, is the fact that we encourage people to, if they need help, to go seek it, and just to keep the conversations going. So, all right. With that said, I actually met you through Instagram, and you do a lot of what I like to do, which is archery. Me personally, I've just gotten into it, but how did you get into archery? And actually, talk about a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Stephanie. A lot of people in college started calling me Steph, so that's where the archer Steph comes from. I got into archery when I was just under 12, I think, and my dad had taken me hunting with him forever. And then I was finally old enough to go take hunter ed, and he was like, "Okay, are you going this year?" And I was like, "I don't want to shoot a gun. I wanted nothing to do with guns. They were too loud for me." Never shot one up until this point. And the first time I actually shot a gun was to practice to go take the hunter ed certification class. So I was like, I don't want to shoot a gun, but I'll try archery. And he's like, whoa, I've never done archery before. I don't know how to do that. And so together he had a friend that lent me a Genesis bow for the first time, shot it in our backyard with a little thumb trigger release, super simple setup, flung a bunch of arrows. And then he decided later to go up buy me a big kid bow and self a bow. So we got started together, grew up shooting. In high school, I was actually lucky enough to work at a bow shop once I got my USA level 1 instructor certification. So I did tech stuff and then was an instructor. And then we also started a JOAD club in conjunction with me working at the bow shop. So lots of instruction and training and everything. When I went off to school in Montana, I actually stopped all things archery. And yeah, so 2.5 years of my life, I think I shot my bow twice. And which shout out to, I think it's called Big Sky Archery in Bozeman, Montana. They have one of the coolest ranges I've ever been to. And so I went there once, did their techno hunt, did their indoor 3D range, never went back, but I got into duck hunting with a friend. So that was pretty fun. After school, I went back and worked back to my hometown, worked in a bank. And let me tell you, for someone who's outgoing and an outdoorsy person, a bank teller job is like the worst job you have, especially when it's really hard to keep track of money. Especially $100 bills. They stick together really well. So it's really I was just not a good bank teller. And on Facebook, one of my friends shared that, well, actually it was Paige Pierce shared that Oregon was hiring for their archery education coordinator. And I was laying in bed when I saw this and I was like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that was a job. I should just apply, because I had a business degree and all of my years of teaching and certification. So I was like, I'd be perfect for it. Maybe I'll get the chance to interview. Didn't hear back for a couple months, so just kind of left my mind. And then I got a call one day and they're like, hey, you never responded to our email. Did you want the interview or not? And I was like, what email? I didn't want anything. And so went back, got the interview, got the job. So I was the archery education coordinator in Oregon for 2 years, which was a lot of fun. I got certified in NASP and S3DA that way. NASP is the National Archery in the Schools program, and they're actually who I work for now. I am the Western Regional Assistant. So I manage Washington, Montana, Idaho, not manage, but I help out the coordinators in these states. Northern California, Oregon, Wyoming, and British Columbia. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I'm working on reactivating a lot of schools in Washington right now. Just ran a class in Montana. Before that, just ran a class in Idaho. So archery's picking back up. It's pretty cool.
That's good to hear, honestly, because I know for me, whenever I go shooting my bow, I feel really good, and I actually get to work on my back muscles, so that's kind of cool. But yeah, so and the funny thing about me is that I didn't really get into a whole lot of the outdoor stuff until way later, I think until I was 22. And that was, no fault of my parents, of course, it was just that they never did all that stuff growing up, because kind of city people to a certain degree. So yeah.
You're from
So
California, right?
I'm from California. They're from Mexico. So
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
But they lived in a city in Mexico, so it's like it's like not necessarily like outdoors life, or anything like that.
Which
Even
is,
though,
or I
Mhm.
was just gonna say, it's interesting because that kind of like 20 to 30 age range right now is huge in the R3 efforts that all of the Fish and Wildlife agencies are trying to recruit new hunters and anglers to get them out to the outdoors. So you're just the perfect recruit.
Yeah. I mean, well, for me, it was kind of more of the COVID situation that kind of pushed me into more of the outdoors. Although last year, not last year, in 2019, that's when I first got my compound bow, and but the problem is I didn't really shoot it for like 6 months until we were actually able to like shoot it during COVID. Ironically, because a lot of the archery ranges were closed initially here in Texas, and we were just kind of like going behind warehouses, like me and my buddy, like just getting like a giant like bag or whatever, just shooting at it like in behind warehouses and stuff like that, getting kicked out from place to place, and
Oh no.
yeah, that's kind of like how we did it because we were just like, well, we want to do something. We would go running like on a trail in the mornings, but then it's like, okay, we practice boxing, and then after that, what? Like nothing. So
Yeah,
yeah, so mhm.
I was gonna say it was hard because our indoor range was closed down for a while too, and Texas is a little bit warmer than up here, but we have a long, rainy, cold season.
Yeah,
So it's not fun to go shoot the 3D course or the flat range and sit out in the rain unless
yeah.
you're up for it. Then it could be fun if you're splashing in puddles, but
Yeah,
not.
I mean, it's funny because like I think you would think that we would have like better weather, but like it's still kind of like choppy, like with the wind and everything. So like sometimes we would hit the wall like with the arrows, which is not fun at all.
Well, and then so where did your arrow go that one day when you didn't knock it correctly? Did it hit the target or it hit the wall?
The one time where I hurt myself, that one. So
Yeah, that time.
yeah, that time. So actually, it just stayed flat on my shoulder. Like it just kind of like
Oh, it
I
didn't
don't,
go anywhere.
yeah, I didn't go anywhere because they fell off the string, right? So there was no energy transfer to the arrow, and
Gotcha.
it's the compound bow tried killing me. So I was like, yeah, no,
Well,
yeah.
you had asked me about trigger safety, but it actually happened yesterday where I don't know if his arrow wasn't knocked or I think his mask bumped his release actually, but I was shooting next
Mhm.
to a guy on the flat range and all of a sudden his release went off halfway drawn back. He was using a thumb trigger and he gets down to his target and his arrow's like 6 inches away from his other arrows. And he's like, wow, there's something to go for actually like aiming at the target while you're drawing. Like, and that's
Yeah.
the thing for NASP is point and draw pointed at the target. That way, if you do miss, you're more likely to hit the target than have your arrow go in the wall or somewhere else.
Yeah. So I kind of do. I kind of point it down a little bit when I hold it, but as I'm drawing it, I pick it back up towards the target. So like I
Yeah.
make yeah. So that it's very similar to like firearms. At least that's how I'm treating it. Because even my buddy is not necessarily a professional, but he's been doing archery a lot more than I have. So like he doesn't have like the certifications that you do, but he grew up with it. Versus like me, like I didn't grow up with it at all.
I mean, you guys could go get them and then be volunteers for all of these awesome programs. We're always looking for more volunteers.
I'm actually considering doing that as for sure. The only thing is that I need to get a little bit more proficient with the bow. Not have too many of those videos where it's the beads are flying all over the place and hitting me in the face. So I think I should wait until that is very very mitigating to like almost 0%.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, but and it's funny that you said like I think it was growing up that you didn't want to really be around firearms and. Like one thing that I'm noticing, at least because I started on firearms, that was actually the first thing I started when in terms of the outdoors, not necessarily hunting, but just going out target practicing, target shooting and stuff like that. But like the more I'm kind of progressing through, like the more outdoor activities, the more I realize that I'm more into like the manual operated like things. Like for example, like we like go from like a semi-automatic rifle to a bolt action. I prefer bolt action a lot more. Just I don't know, like or even like
More of a challenge.
yeah, yeah. I like to actually work and earn like my shot or whatever, right? So like, even like the same thing with shotguns. Like the shotgun is probably the best thing. I mean, my favorite thing to shoot. And even like from a shotgun perspective, like going from semi-automatic to pump action, I prefer the pump action a lot more. It's just
I'm the opposite because I can't hit things very well yet. I'm only
mm,
going on 3 years and I shoot maybe once or twice a year. So I went from a pump, and then on a recent goose hunt, I tried a semi for the first time, and I was like, I can actually like fast enough to shoot stuff now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's definitely what is it, pros and cons to either one, right? Like, semi-auto, you can get a quicker follow-up shot versus like a pump action. But at least with the pump action, at least from what I've seen, is like I get to control the rate of fire and have a little bit more control over the weapon itself.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, and but it goes back to like, okay, like I like the struggle. Like, it might sound a little bad, but no, I just like the struggle. And this kind of carried over to like just going like shooting bows, because I mean you have a crossbow, right? And I looked at that thing and I was like, yeah, I'm not ever touching one of those things. It's too easy. Like I'm just gonna go with compound bow and eventually a recurve, like, and just go like that way.
Okay. I was even going to compare it to a lot of archers develop trigger panic from using an index release versus a back tension or a thumb trigger. So it's just kind of, a back tension has a little bit more of a technique to it than just a point and shoot, pull the trigger kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, see, I didn't even know that. That's kind of why I was really excited to have you on, because like these type of things, it's good to know, and I am kind of like really like trying to absorb as much information as possible, right? So.
Well, I always say, and especially because that's something I struggle with, is getting my finger on the trigger. And it sounds easy. You just put your finger out there, right, and pull the trigger. Well, archery is 99% mental. And I say that all the time, it's only 1% pulling the bow back and holding it and then releasing. 99% is the rest of the stuff you have to do to get the arrow to hit right where you're aiming. And so there's this thing called trigger panic, and there's this thing called target panic. So trigger panic is what I have, where you sit with your finger behind the trigger, and then all of a sudden when you're about ready to shoot and your dot floats through the dot, you pop your finger and pull it really fast. You don't ever lay your finger on the trigger. What you're supposed to do is just lay your finger out on the trigger, just like a gun, and then slowly pull it back. Okay, so trigger panic. I can't physically get my brain to put my finger on the trigger to get it rest. And that probably started when I had one of my first cheap releases, and it was set at such a hot pressure that it went off with barely any touch. But a lot of people, or if they have target panic where they can't hold their pin or their dot in the center of the target, that's another thing. They'll sit maybe 6 inches below the dot and they can hold steady. They're not moving side to side. They're not moving up or down. They're just holding right there, and they can't physically get the bow to go up those extra 6 inches. So they move to sight. But so for those two things, a lot of the easy fix is to go to a back tension release or a thumb release. That way you're not, for some reason, we just have panic when it comes to our index finger.
Ah, okay. Yeah, see, like, I mean, I'm the trigger release is the index release that I had. I mean, that's what I use, right? But like I'm kind of equating it again, going back to firearms. So I have have my finger like slightly above, not necessarily on the trigger itself, but above the little apparatus, right? The little thing that has the trigger, right? And then as I lining up my sights and I'm trying to I got my target like already in place. That's when I slowly move my index finger towards the trigger and then release. So yeah.
So you should try to get it actually just laying on the trigger and holding, and then as soon as you're ready, slowly pull it. That way, because you're trying to take all of the motion out of the shot, and the more like me flicking the trigger like that, that's a lot of motion that's happening right when I'm firing the arrow, and that can move where I'm hitting the target. So even if you're just holding out here and then you're gonna pop it down like that, that's more motion than if you rest it on the trigger and then just pull it back slightly. So
I see what you're saying. Yeah. No, yeah, and I think that applies exactly 100% to especially handguns, like, like because if you jerk the trigger, like you're gonna miss where you want to actually shoot it. I mean, it won't be off by like a whole lot, but you're still not gonna be accurate in terms of like where you want to actually shoot. It's the same thing I would imagine. It's just if you actually lay, like, because when you have your finger on the trigger, and a lot of people like they think it's just like a push versus I just slowly kind of like ease into it kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's the same thing, right?
Yeah. So that's why a lot of times with index triggers, you want to get them a little bit colder, so you actually have to pull versus it just going off with any pressure.
I'm definitely gonna try that probably next week.
There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so well, that's those activities definitely help in terms of like my mental health because I was kind of going a little bit stir crazy. The funny thing about the fishing aspect is that I had a fish, what is it, a spinning reel for like a year before COVID, and I never used it. And then here it is, just staring at me like in my living room. Like, okay, definitely, I need to go take it out. And like, I taught myself how to basically, I taught myself how to fish. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
And I think a lot of people were realizing that during COVID too, because bow shops can't even like still can't keep bows on the shelves.
Mm.
Manufacturing got, manufacturing got slowed down so much during the shutdown that it's taking weeks for people to special order their bows and even bow shops just to keep anything on the shelf. And then like the day it comes in, they sell it and it's gone again.
Even
So
kayaks. Yeah, the kayaks are the same thing. Yeah,
yeah,
I talked to. I'm sorry, what was that?
everyone's going outdoors.
Yes, it's really interesting because when you're told to be staying inside, you go outside the opposite, right? So,
Yeah, humans don't listen. It's
I mean,
okay.
yeah,
I would
I mean,
for my mental health, I need to be outdoors anyways.
yeah, and I'm guilty about the not listening part. So, yeah, and the funny thing is just that, like the kayaks, at least there's like a huge market for like now it's selling used kayaks because the back order is ridiculously long. So, I mean, people are making money off selling their old kayaks just because people really want one.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think people are just taking whatever they can grab right now just to get out there and fling some arrows.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I got lucky that I was able to buy. I mean, it wasn't expensive. It was like $300 or 350 or something like that. But I think it was on sale at the time.
On everything.
What
That's
happened?
that's when you add on all the extras though, the arrows, the sights, the stabilizers, that's when it gets expensive.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So it's one of those things where it's like it's cheap. I mean, it's expensive to get into, but once you're in it, like it's like in the long run, it's not as expensive. Like,
I always tell my friends like if they walk up with a new bow and it's I'm gonna not so nice of a bow, right? Like you just kind of know it's lower quality, and I'm just like don't shoot my bow. You're gonna regret it. Don't touch it. Be happy with your bow because that's all you know. Or if you go to an archery shop and you have a $500 budget, tell them that your budget for everything is $500 and don't shoot a bow outside of your budget because you are just going to spend all of your money if you shoot
dang.
nicer.
Yeah, that kind of the same thing is said about like fishing rods and stuff like that. And you try like this really expensive like reel that costs like $200, and then you go back to your like one that costs like 50. It's like, yeah, I kind of want that one. You know?
Makes a big difference. There's definitely like there's reasons why bows cost so much. It's because they really are that much nicer.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of science and a lot of engineering. A lot of physics for sure that goes into that. People don't think like again the bad experience that I had with like the beads, the little sound beads flying hitting my forehead. That really showed me like how much like physics really plays into this because so much of that energy like transfers perfectly into like the little tiny arrow, and if there's no arrow there, like you're screwed like big time.
Yeah. Yeah. I had someone who wanted to shoot a Genesis arrow, which is a tiny little aluminum arrow out of their 60-pound bow one time. And I was like, no, there's no way that's going to absorb all of that energy. You're going to get, it's going to go boom right in front of your face.
I'm lucky a lot. I didn't lose an eye. Like honestly, like if it went maybe like 2 inches shorter, like or lower, like it would have hit my eye for sure, and I probably would have lost it for sure, 100%. Like I don't doubt it. Like that's why when they fixed it, because I was at Bass Pro, they have a range at the in one of the locations next to where I'm at, and I took it down to fix it that same time that happened that same day. They fixed it, and then when I went back up to shoot it, I put on my shades just to make sure that in case it does fly off again, like it hits the shades at least first.
Just a little bit of safety.
Yes. So, and that's actually a very good transitioning point because I know we did talk about a few points. I mean, a few issues like when it comes to safety, but do you really? So, the reason why I ask this question is because like when you look at like for example like a firearm or something versus like a bow, I think people I mean this is my personal opinion. I think people take safety with the bow a little bit more what is it? They don't take it as serious because they look at the stigma of a firearm versus the stigma of I mean there's really no stigma with the bow, right? Like at this point, like but or very little at least. So do you think that's taken for granted?
Yeah, I mean, kind of, because you have to be more present if you're going to do damage with a bow. You can accidentally pull a trigger on a firearm and really bad things can happen, but to do it with a bow, you actually have to go through the motions of, well, I guess with a gun, you have to load it and everything, but it could be accidentally loaded. If a bow was accidentally loaded, you still have to go through the motions of pulling it back and then letting it go. But, the main safety rules, don't dry fire. Make sure you always have an arrow properly nocked, because just like we were talking about a second ago, you need somewhere for that energy to go. And so arrow nocked. If you have a friend drawing your bow back, which I just honestly don't let any of my friends draw my bow back for the first time. I always either give them a Genesis bow or tell them to go to a bow shop. And then once they know what they're doing, then they can touch my stuff. Just a little pro tip there. But and then honestly, the most accidents actually happen at the target or like walking around with your bow, not from accidentally shooting people, if that makes sense. So the only accident I've ever seen, well, I've seen two. I was on a 3D course range and someone rolled down the hill or fell down the hill and twisted their ankle and had to be taken out on a ATV, go to the hospital. So they could have just been walking too and had that accident. So I don't really count that as an archery accident. The other one is I was shooting with this guy and I was scoring down at the targets and I dropped my pen, and being the nice guy that he was, thanks, Zach, he bent down to grab my pen for me and he cut his head open on the nocks poking out of the targets. So you got to be really careful. And then like in all of my NASP classes, we always talk about keeping your students about 2 yards back on the target line. That way, and only one person at a target at a time. That way, when you're pulling your arrows out, your friends don't get impaled. Is what I.
Okay, yeah. So and that kind of stuff, like it was obvious once I got into archery, but like I did notice, like, well, people think, like, for example, one thing that you don't do when you're when you're at the range, like with firearms and stuff, you don't muzzle anybody, even if the gun is not loaded, right?
Right.
Like it's one of those things where don't point at anything that you're not willing to shoot. And then always treat the firearm like it's loaded.
And the same goes with archery, but usually only when it is loaded. With guns, like, you don't point the gun at anyone, whether it's loaded or not loaded. With a bow, it's not. If there's an arrow in it, don't point it at someone. A lot of times you don't want to talk to people when they're at full draw, especially when you're behind them, because all of a sudden you've got the person turning around at full draw to say something back to you. That happens more often than I would like to say it should. Yeah, I've had someone do that to me before. I'm like, well, stop, turn around.
Oh man, like was it the other day, some dude that we were with, he didn't have the bow drawn, but he had the trigger on the string and he was ready to draw it, right? But then he started pointing at the group next to us, like, because he was like what you said, like my other buddy called him out. Yeah, he talked behind him and he goes, what? And he turns to his left. And I'm just immediately, I just smack his bow, like, and point across the range, because it's like I'm used to that with firearms, right? Like, don't muzzle anybody, right?
Right.
So and he was just like, "What are you doing?" Like, dude, don't point, and like don't point your bow with the arrow in it, whether you haven't drawn or not, at someone. Like, you never know, like, right?
You never know, especially with broadheads, because that's actually a common accident in the hunting industry. Is you're out with a buddy and you both have your arrows nocked, whether you're seeing animals or you're not, and all of a sudden, I was in an area where a dad walked into the son and killed him because the arrow just went straight through him. There was enough pressure with him walking forward. He just walked straight into him, and the broadheads are sharp. It will go through a person. It goes through an animal. So you just, especially with broadheads, you want to be super careful that you're keeping it pointed away, or you guys are not walking one in front of another.
Right. And I think, it might sound a little odd, but I think definitely human flesh is like a lot more softer than like one like of an animal. Like, I'm kind of just referring that to like boars and stuff. Like when you look at boars, like their skin is super tough.
Well, and like turkeys, they have a lot of bones in their wings and stuff to protect their body. Or I don't really know if deer and elk would be any different because they just have fur, but they're living in the wilderness. They got to have a little bit thicker skin than we do.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. That's why, like, when I see like like hunting videos and a bunch of other stuff like from the wildlife, I realized like how weak we really are like as a species, like individually, you know?
Yeah.
It's
Only a
like,
select few could make it out for a couple nights on their own. You know, if you can't take everything in your survivalist backpack and if you actually had to go live in the woods, most of us could not do that.
I want to say confidently that I would survive a few days.
Okay.
A few days. I'm not gonna say that I'll thrive, but I'll survive for sure.
Depends on the area.
True.
If
Very true.
there's like poisonous spiders or even little house spiders, I'd probably be screaming all the time. But if there's any of those or alligators, which there are not in Washington, but if I was somewhere like that, I don't think I'd survive very long.
Oh, with gators, I'd definitely shoot on sight, 100%. Like I hate gators. Yeah, like I don't care if it's a bow or even a rock, I'll throw it at them. Like, you know, it's like if I have to, like, to get away, like no way.
Yeah, and then climb a tree.
Oh, that happened to me, and I keep saying this story because it happened to me here in Texas when I first started like fishing, like in more of like a forest type of situation, like more natural environment, and went to the grasslands, like that's like about an hour away from where I live, and I didn't think of like taking like any kind of firearm or anything because I mean that's the thing. Like even though I do enjoy firearms and everything, and for hunting, or even though I haven't really been hunting, but I'm still working on that. Like I'm just not used to carrying it, right? So didn't carry, just took my fishing gear and all that stuff, and I saw that the pond only had like limited bank access and I had to go all the way around the other side. And being the adventure and like the one that's the kind of just like, all right, let's do it, like, you know, without even thinking, I started going through the forest to go to the other side, and all of a sudden I hear little tracks, and sure enough, immediately I find myself up a tree. So
Well, at
yeah,
least you can climb.
I did not know I could climb.
I was gonna say in that situation, you'd probably find out if you can or not.
I definitely found out, and apparently I could climb, and very well.
How long were you in the tree?
I don't remember, honestly.
It's all black. It just happened. I remember the gator.
Well, the boar, it was just like I
Oh
remember
boy.
just, yeah, it was a boar that actually chased me. And there was actually several. There was like two big ones and then like a few little ones.
Scary.
Yeah, no, and they were definitely ready to kill me for sure. And I was just looking at, I just remember kind of like super like my like heart was just bumping out of my chest. Like I thought I was just gonna rip out, and like I was like, oh my god. And I'm just like right there, just like hugging the tree, or like I don't even remember how I was holding it, but yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that's not awesome, but it's awesome now that you're here to tell the story.
Exactly. It's awesome now. Not awesome while that was
When
happening.
it happened, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it's still a fun experience, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I encourage people to actually go to nature, go out and experience nature, because it's different when you're like seeing it on like YouTube or anything like that, or even seeing like somebody else's Instagram profile, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
nothing
so it's
like this on Instagram.
exactly, it's definitely completely different, and it's I honestly believe sometimes we don't necessarily have the appropriate amount of respect for nature that we should, and a lot of that could come from basically just the fact that, you know, we don't really experience it a whole lot anymore. We live in concrete jungles now, and yeah.
Well, it's interesting because even like it's not just hunters or people that want to hunt that have that, but it's the people that feed the deer in their yard because they think that, oh, there's so many houses now they don't have anywhere to eat. Well, no, they still have thousands of acres of forest land. They would just rather eat the corn and apples out of your yard, and that's why they're coming into town.
Yeah.
Don't get me started about the deer in town. I I
Oh
think
well, yeah, I feel like you have to share a story now, now that you said that.
we have this local deer. His name is Andy. He was orphaned because his mom got hit by a car, and
Ooh,
he has his own calendar now.
really?
He would have survived with no human interference. He would have been okay. But someone saw that his mom got hit by a car, and so they started bringing him food every day. So he still hangs out in this person's backyard, has never tried to go back to the forest lands. They post updates on Facebook on our community page, and lots of questions like, "Oh, he's molting. Like, is that normal?" They don't know that it's molting, but they're like, "Oh, he must have rabies or something."
Oh wow.
And so it's just, yeah, it's kind of crazy. But where I live on an island, but still, only like a fourth of the island is actually developed, and the rest is like a lot of forest lands.
Hmm.
So they have somewhere to go. They just choose not to because they have better options here in town. And then they get hit by cars.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
Coyotes come into town. It's a bad cycle. And that's why in a lot of places it's illegal to feed the deer or the
It makes
wildlife.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
It makes sense. I mean, even here in some of the ponds, like I think for similar reasons, they don't want you to feed the wildlife, but people still do because I mean, people, right? So yeah, I mean, and I've seen some of my friends actually have like they're not necessarily in places where there's just a lot of deer, but they'll pop up every now and then. They'll feed them strawberries, and then they go, and then sometimes they come back, sometimes they don't. I don't know.
Because everyone wants the video of a deer coming up to their car and eating out of their hand.
That's true.
Well, I had a friend and they found a deer on a beach and it was a big buck and he actually was what's the word? Mating season.
Mm.
Rut. He was in rut and he attacked her like 20-year-old daughter
Oh
because
wow.
she just got too close for comfort. So beware. They're wild animals. They're not cute and cuddly.
I mean, they're cute, but they're definitely not cuddly.
Yeah. Yeah. They're cute from a distance.
Exactly, and I think, yeah, the episode with Captain Wildlife that you saw that you talked about, like we actually went over that multiple times. We tried stressing that because it's like if you see a wild animal that you see like on the Disney movies, do not pet it because it will try to kill you. Like
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
yeah, like Bambi. Bambi's not that friendly when you see him out in the like open and all that stuff. So that's why. And that's kind of like where I'm talking about, like the respect that we really need to have for nature. We kind of take it for granted sometimes.
Picking up your garbage. That's a huge one for me. If you're going
Mhm.
out duck hunting, pick up your shells. If you take snacks, take your wrappers out with you. Like, there's so much garbage out along the banks, out in the woods. Like, we can be doing a much better job. And a lot of it is hunters that just don't care and think, or I guess they just think someone else is going to pick up after them, or it will just dissolve and biodegrade, but it doesn't for a really long time.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because even like when I've hiked in certain places here and in California, like there are certain places that you like literally have to put a good amount of effort to get to, but yet you still see a bunch of trash lying around. So it's like, so if you took like a 24 pack, you walked it all the way up there or all the way down there, wherever, that's a lot of effort, right? Because you have a 24 pack, it weighs,
Yeah.
whatever it weighs, and then you would think that on to bring it back with you, it'd be easier because you could use the same container, right? Like the same container. I mean, obviously, I'm using a specific example, but you can use the same container, throw all the cans in there. Now they're empty, so it's even lighter now. So it's like,
Yeah. But I literally watched a guy throw a can off a bridge yesterday on the freeway, so I don't know what people think anymore.
I think it's just a disconnect from nature, really. Like, I honestly think that.
Everyone just needs to go hang out and listen to the birds. There's something special about like being up before daylight and in the woods, and then all of a sudden all of the animals start waking up and you're sitting there and there's no city noises. It's the best feeling ever. One time I was sitting there and I never knew why. Like, you would think when there's footprints in the woods from deer and stuff, they walk through in a group once and you don't really know what they're actually doing. So I was sitting there having a snack, and I think there was a buck, a doe, and then two fawns. And they walked through this meadow, and there was a couple inches of snow on the ground. And these two fawns were running in circles, just having a blast chasing each other through this meadow. And it was the cutest thing I've ever seen. And then I was like, well, that's why there's so many footprints out there, because they're just running around in circles in the meadow. So yeah, there's definitely good feelings that come out of just sitting and watching and disconnecting from social media and your phone and being off grid for a little bit.
Yeah, it's a very meditative process. I've noticed, and this is just for me, even just being like out in the outdoors, just like hiking and stuff. I haven't necessarily been hunting myself, but just doing that, and like I've talked to hunters, and they share stories of like when they were stalking this animal, they see how it interacts and they see how it behaves, and then they may not necessarily get the shot, but the fact that they see how it's supposed to be living and how it's its natural state, basically, like that kind of gives them some fulfillment. And even if the hunt didn't go the way they wanted to, at least they got a very good spiritual, I mean, I guess you could call it spiritual
Yeah.
experience, which if when we're talking about mental health, like those kind of things put you at ease, definitely like decompress yourself mentally. And I think that's what's really missing. I mean, granted, you will talk to some people, whether hunters, anglers, or whatever, and they'll be like, well, we don't need more people out, whatever, but you know.
Yeah, and I actually did a blog post about that not too long ago about being successful isn't just filling your tag and actually bringing home an animal. It's going out and, it could be seeing something. It could be putting a stock on something. It could be some cool nature thing you got to see that just makes this hunt successful. And I think that's a big part for especially archery is if you go and you're trained with a certified instructor, there's ways to start you out being successful. Because I've had people where they're like, yeah, I went the first time, the guy who gave me the bow didn't know what he was doing. I hit my arm and I never tried it again. And that's not what we want, right? Have you hit your arm?
No, not yet.
Okay, you're lucky. So you get like a 6-inch long purple and green and yellow bruise, and it hurts real bad. So always try and avoid, if you have overextended elbows, slap an arm guard on there. But so setting someone up for success from the beginning, they're going to have a way better experience and they're going to stick with it versus someone who has no clue what they're doing and is just like, here, let's go back to 20 yards for your first shot. Just try and hit that target. It's someone who has a group the size of your wingspan versus someone who can actually hit in the basketball and slowly scoots back. Those two people are going to have way different first-time experiences.
Right. I think that's 100%. You're absolutely right. I was very fortunate that that even though I'm more self-taught than obviously instructed, I was able to still get some enjoyment. But I think had I done, like, for example, archery specifically, like had it been that 100% just by myself, probably would not have picked it up as quick or even just stuck with it. Like I do agree with that. And that's kind of like something that I do tend to talk about sometimes, that those are barriers of entry to like certain, activities like that. And they can discourage people from doing it.
For sure. If someone's like, I can't hit the target, or that was beginner's luck, they're way less likely to actually keep up with it.
Yeah, which kind of brings me to the next point, because we did mention social media a few minutes ago, and then we're talking about like this, like, because I think this plays into like the attention span of the human actually declining, like, and it's been declining for a while already. Like, we don't have the same attention span that we did maybe like 22 decades ago, 3 decades ago, and I think that also kind of plays into like not having the patience to stick with something.
Mm-hmm.
But ironically, that as the attention span of the human kind of goes down, the consumption of social media has gone way up. So like that, I honestly think they're definitely hand in hand. And do you see do you see that same trend as well? And if so, like what are your thoughts on that?
So I actually took a film class when I was doing my first year at community college, and we watched, the very first film that was produced and then films through the decades and where they're at now. And it's really interesting because, you go back to the ones where there was no sound, just some audio music clips added in. And it's so slow that you just get bored watching it. And then fast forward 10 years and now they've got song and dance and the little speeded up clips, but it's still in black and white. And in those days, this used to be enough to keep someone's full attention. Now fast forward to today, and you've got to have shooting and music and people talking and car races and everything building up suspense to even hold an ounce of your attention, because most times when we're watching movies nowadays, we're on our phones too, just kind of listening in. So something that used to be like the highlight of your day and you pay all of your attention to, like now you're trying to multitask, but you're not really paying attention to either one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just like when you look at like sitcoms, like how they evolved, they used to have, I think, 2-minute, 3-minute intros, like where it was just a song being played out till its fullest. And then now, like, you'll be lucky if you get anything more than 20 seconds of a song, like at the beginning of the intro.
And Netflix, it allows you just to skip through it too.
Right, exactly. And there's that too. Yeah. Now you can and I'll be honest, I'm guilty of that, at least with the Netflix part, because I'm like, yes, I can skip the intro, hit that button.
Exactly. No, I do the same thing.
Yeah, and it's I definitely do think, and obviously, like I mentioned to you offline, like this is not necessarily a political thing, but like it definitely helps. Like the fact that we have the short attention span definitely affects us, like when we're looking at political stuff, we're looking at other stuff that's not controversial, but tends to have different differentiating opinions, like stuff in science and things like that. And then people like because they're limited on of how much they're going to spend on a given article, they kind of tend to read the headline and then just go based off of that. So then you have arguments around that, and then when you have arguments with people, you're really stressing yourself out mentally, because the whole thing, I mean, it's not even an argument at this point, or even a discussion. Like, it's just more like, I want to win,
Right.
And I think that definitely helps. That definitely contributes to the mental decline of people overall. And this definitely happened way before COVID. I mean, the whole thing with COVID just made it worse, but it's definitely been going on for a while.
Well, I think especially with COVID is we were all locked down just staring at our phones, and they had to keep coming out with some new headline every 5 minutes to keep us all, I don't want to say entertained, but to give us something to look at. And I didn't always agree with everything they were putting out. And I feel like a lot of times they were putting stuff out before they even knew what they should be putting out. So it's created a distrust of the media too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, nobody really trusts the media anymore. But I did talk about this in the episode I just recently published, where so social media, like we were talking about that, and we were saying like how small businesses were actually on board first because they were using them as useful tools, because it gave them like the specific audience that they can target, versus just sending out a bunch of like flyers and stuff like that for advertisement. Now they can be more precise and then be more effective.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you look at the media is also a business as well. So they came in, they were already in decline outside of the social media sphere. They came in, so now they have to play the game. So then that kind of made it worse. And now it's like, oh, like your dog can die if you don't, like if you don't take grapes off the table. And then people are like, oh, I'm gonna take the grapes off the table, and then start stressing out or something. I mean, I'm giving like a very weird example,
but no, that's very true for Facebook and Instagram, because I know a lot of people are being censored right now. And or even I posted something the other day, not about COVID at all, but I had one of their trigger words, and all of a sudden it had the little questions about COVID, click this link at the bottom. And so it's there. The media definitely is directing people towards whatever the big company is and what they want us to see and hear. So, but I have to say, like, the last year that I've been the Archer Steph on Instagram, and all of the people I've been able to meet and start communicating with and get to know, those are some of the best relationships, especially during COVID when you couldn't actually go out. And because I've moved a lot. I grew up in Washington, went to school in Montana, then I lived in Oregon, and now I'm back in my hometown, but all of my high school friends are gone. So, and I can't really go out and do anything. So a lot of my friends I've made on Instagram, and I've actually gone out and shot at the archery range with some of them, or, I've actually met up with them in person. So Instagram has been, I don't want to say like my Tinder, but it's been a great way to meet people.
No, agreed. I mean, because even myself included, fishing, even you right now, like that you're on the podcast, like, thank you for that, by the way. And yeah, like I got to meet so many people here around my area in Texas, and I was able to fish with them. And now I got several fishing buddies that I just hit up, like, hey, you want to go fish today? All right, cool. Or no, I can't, not today, but what about next day? And yeah.
But what's even cooler is it's international too. Like, I was talking with some lady in Austria this morning, or I've got friends up in Canada that I'm talking to, or just all over the US. And just the network that you're able to build and get to know is huge.
Yeah, Captain Wildlife, like, I mean, I met him through the fishing community. He's from Quebec, so
yeah.
I mean, there's definitely positives from social media, and that's why, like, I'm not 100% against it. It's just, like, yeah, because I can't really be against it because of what you just said. Like, we're able to communicate better in certain situations. I mean, right now, when human interactions face to face were very limited, you can at least, hey, let's do a video call here and there, or whatever. So like the Skype or Snapchat, like send me a snap of how you're doing. Even like what happened in the last few weeks here in Texas, where it was really snowing, and we were kind of like losing our minds a little bit. Like, my family, like, they saw that I was just doing front flips on my story, like, making snow angels and all kinds of stuff. And they saw like the post. So they're like, oh, we're over here worrying about like whether he has enough food. And this dude's just,
and he's fine.
Yeah, he's frolicking out in the snow. And I'm just like, ooh, snow. I've never seen snow before.
That's awesome. But yes, it's good for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's kind of why like it's definitely good to talk about this, right? Because we at least can agree on like, okay, well, there's definitely a healthy, way of consuming social media. Absolutely.
And I mean, one day I got told, it was funny. Another community Facebook post, some lady was talking about her fence that went up. It's story time now. A fence went up on her property, and she wanted advice because she thought her neighbor put the fence up, and she thought it was more on her property than it should be. And so I gave her some advice. I was like, hey, reach out to a surveyor. They'll come and audit the property. If they had the fence there for so long, though, blah, 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 whatever. Well, even though it was very positive advice and had nothing to do with hunting, she went to my profile, went through my profile, had to scroll for a bit to get back to a picture of me with my deer, and then decided to tell me I was a murderer. I needed to have zombie deer come back and kill me. And then she took that, screenshotted it, posted it all over her personal profiles, and was like, guys, like, this bad word, like, we'd all just need to hate her, and like crazy, and more talk about zombie deer eating me. And the whole time I was like, I got haters.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was like, this should be an awful feeling. And for like the first minute, I was kind of down about it, but it means you're doing something right and you're passionate about it. Like
Yeah.
as long as you know you're doing the right thing and you're proud of it, it's kind of cool to have haters. Like, not, it's not cool, but it's kind of cool. It
I
means
mean,
you're
you can feed off of it.
reaching people, and like
Yeah.
people are hearing what you're trying to share.
Yeah. You do get to see some interesting people, and you can kind of feed off of that a little bit too, because it kind of like, all right, well, this dude's obviously just upset at this, so I'm just gonna keep making him upset, like, by keep doing what I'm doing, being successful and all this stuff, right?
Exactly.
And yeah, the thing is just I think we have a little bit of a bias in the sense that we want the people to do the right thing by sometimes our standards or our identity, which is
Mhm.
not necessarily the best thing. And I think that's kind of the reason why we do get into a lot more arguments. The fact that we have a, you know, some kind of stance, whatever it may be, but we make it as part of our identity. So now when that said point of view gets challenged, we feel like we're being attacked, like our identity is being attacked,
Yeah.
which it shouldn't be, right? I mean, you look at like certain things, like, for example, science, when, and this is not a knock on COVID, right, or anything like that, but like when you look at certain things, like for science, like it's like, oh, well, the science says this. Okay, yeah, but science is the reason why science is not a cult is because it's begging to be challenged. Like that's the whole point of science, right? So it's not, even though there's many like if you run a test and you test a hypothesis 1,000 times, and like 997 of those times prove your hypothesis, there's still three that don't, right? And that's fine, okay, for whatever reason, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's still absolute, right?
Right.
You look at the example of like water boiling at like, what is it, 100 degrees Celsius. I'm kind of going based off Celsius because this is where like when I was looking at the example, they went with the Celsius, right? So it boils at 100 degrees Celsius. So the science is like, all right, well, we ran this experiment 1,000 times, 100,000 times, every single time, 100 degrees. But it's not absolute because, like for example, in that specific climate or that specific situation, yes, 100 degrees absolute. But when you suspend it at a certain elevation, that said water, now when you try boiling it, it actually the boiling temperature of that now becomes 200 degrees Celsius.
I don't know if you've ever tried to boil something at like 11,000 feet, but it's definitely harder.
Right. So see, so it's like one of those things where like you can't say that something is absolute just because there's been so many experiments, because again, there's a lot of factors that you can manipulate to not make it true. So like the statement itself of boiling water at 100 degrees Celsius, okay, it's not absolute. It may be absolute at like ground level, but not with like 11,000 feet of elevation or something like that.
Yeah, for sure.
So, and even stuff like with like what is it, like the whole thing, like another example that I've used before, it's like when people like think, okay, well, if I drop this pencil, it's gonna fall, like if I drop it, if I'm in the exact same spot here, it's gonna fall in the same spot for some odd reason because history repeats itself. And it's like, well, no, I mean, don't, hold that as part of your identity, because it can be false. Because I mean, it may look like it's in the same spot, but how much can you zoom in to really find out, like, okay, it's off by like 1.0000, like 1 centimeter or something like that. But if
Right.
you had the capability to see it, you wouldn't,
Or like all
yeah.
those TikToks where they take a ping pong ball and bounce it off the pots and pans to get it into a cup at the end or something. And they show it takes them like 100 times and then they finally get it in the cup at the end.
Right.
Every time's different. Every person's different. But
Right.
for
And
me,
exact.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead. No. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just want to be a happy person. I want to share my archery passion. I want to go to the range and shoot my bow and have a good time. Like, that's all I'm about.
Yeah. Same here. That's kind of like where, like, definitely this whole COVID experience and just being a little bit more mellow and working on patience, and also like, because like I've talked about this before, where like, at least for me specifically, like it definitely took a lot of pride out of me, like, and that might sound bad, but like in the sense that, well, I knew it humbled me a lot, is basically what I'm trying to say. Like, going out to fish and then not knowing how to fish definitely humbled me, like, significantly. But at that point, I was just like, you know what? I'm not, even though, like, you look at like social media, and like you may look at like the fishing community, like, oh, who wants to, like, who posts the biggest fish and how many posts that you have that have like double digit bass or something like that. I'm just like looking at all that. I'm like, that's all fun to watch. I mean, and see, but I have nothing to prove to anybody or even myself to a certain degree, like, because it's like I don't want to stress over that.
I held a bow fishing event in Oregon one time, and a couple weeks before we had gone out and we got a different place, but pretty decent sized carp. And then I held this event, and it was to teach people. We had bow fishing equipment. We invited everyone from Portland down to Southern Oregon to come to this lake and shoot with us. And we took them around the lake. We had instructors. One fish. 50 people showed up for this event. One fish was shot. And it was big. It was tiny. But do you know, all of these people were just so excited to be out. And there's something special about bow fishing and getting to like shoot the water and reel it in. It's just way more active than like going archery hunting. It's like fishing, but you're not, versus fishing, you're not sitting waiting to catch a fish. You're just shooting at a shadow you see under the water. So it's very active. And so it was just smiles all over the place, and not a single, well, they were probably bummed, but like they were just excited to be there that day.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, that's like the cliche goes, like, a bad day of fishing always beats a good day at work, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, honestly, like, that's the best for me specifically. That was the best feeling when I kind of like when basically said, "F this. I don't have anything to prove to myself or anything like that. I'm just gonna continue to get better." I might look at myself, like, when it comes to, like, fitness or whatever. I might look at myself in the mirror just to see where I'm at today versus where I'm gonna be a week from now. But that's just for me. It's not. I'm not gonna prove. I'm not gonna. I don't necessarily post all that stuff because it's like nobody really needs to see it. It's the only person that really needs to see that is me. Like, because I'm the only one that's trying to challenge myself to do that.
And that's why I love archery, because it is an individual sport. Like, yes, you can be out competing against other people, but most of the time you're just trying to be yourself and shoot your personal best. And so it's great for that reason. I'm the opposite of you. I'm trying to be a learning profile. So anytime I mess up, I try and share it with everyone so they can learn from my mistakes.
Oh, well, I mean, that's I think those two can be, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. Like, you can, I mean, I can definitely do that, and I do, like when we talked about earlier, I do want to be essentially a point where I could be like, helping somebody else, or like a reference point, hey,
Yeah.
like, volunteering.
Not all the time.
Yeah, that's true. Not necessarily all the time, but still, like, and that's like, I think that's the one thing that we probably should strive a little bit more to, just kind of like, take it slow. Don't because, I mean, social media kind of gave us that instant gratification, so we really need to, like, ease off of that. And I think at this point it might be almost 100% like relatable to like a drug, really, like, somebody having like a addiction to a drug.
I've got a sugar addiction, so I like my cookies and my Skittles.
Well, I have a Coke Zero addiction. I don't know why. I prefer Coke Zero over regular Coke for some odd reason. Don't know why. They
That's kind
basically,
of weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I really never thought about it. I'm just like, why do I like Coke Zero over, like Diet Coke or just regular Coke? I don't know.
Something
So
about that taste.
yeah. Now normally, so we're about the 55-minute mark. Normally, I kind of do like final thoughts, but I think this question would kind of tie into that because I do have the last question that we agreed to talking about, and we don't necessarily have to go too much in detail, but generally speaking, the decline that we're seeing in mental health. Do you
Hmm.
think that's and actually the as well as the decline in attention span? Do you see that as a way as humans devolving or evolving into something else?
I think it's change. I don't really, I would hate to say we're all just becoming couch potatoes and hanging out on our phones and, waiting for information to get to us. But I think a lot of times that's what it is we're not as likely to go out and try something new. We just kind of wait for someone else to do it and then maybe we'll go try it. Um, you know, Someone created fire and they had no clue that that was going to happen. I don't even know if they were scientists enough or if it just happened by accident and then they had to learn how to recreate it. Well, I mean, some people try to make explosions nowadays, but for the most
Mm,
part, we don't try something new unless we know we're going to be successful doing it. So there's just something to say about the people that are willing to appreciate failure. And I
mm,
think that's a big thing in archery with whether you're going to be a winner in archery or if you're just going to shoot and have a good time flinging arrows is, are you okay with missing? Because every so often you're going to miss a shot. And I got advice from a pro shooter one time, and she was like, you shoot, you think about that arrow, and then you move on to the next one. Because if you sit and you just think about the previous arrow, the rest of your shots are just going to go downhill. But if you shoot it, you think about what you did wrong, and you move on, it's over, and your next shot can be better. So I think we are evolving. I don't know in what way. I hope it doesn't affect us as we're out being hunters and archers and fishermen, but something's changing and it probably won't be this generation, but future generations will be different than we are.
yeah. So that's a very interesting point, especially when you talked about like how like you shoot one arrow and you kind of just like analyze it, digest it a little bit, and then just move on. Like you don't let it like dwell, like consume the rest of your time and energy, or just dwell on that because, like you said, like the next few shots goes downhill. I think that's perfectly translatable into like any aspect in life, really. I mean, what do you think?
Oh, 100%. Bringing it back to archery, though, like if you look at the Vegas shooters, if they have a bad shot and they miss an X, they're out of the championship. But
Mm,
I mean, they can't just walk off. They got to finish it because they've got so many eyes on them. So they just got to let it roll off. And that's why they're pro shooters, is because if something bad happens, they can figure it out. And that's why a lot of people struggle with archery, is because of the mentality of it. And
mm.
have a bad shot. I've seen a kid throw his bow, like full on chuck it at the ground before because he had a bad round. And I was like, whoa, like I can't believe he did that. Really nice bow too. His parents just kind of stood there and let him do that. And they're like, should we say something to him? And I was like, yes, you don't treat a tool like that. Um, but yeah, I think all aspects, we just want to be successful, but we need to learn how to fail and then move on and do it better next time.
Absolutely. I'm gonna take I guess this might kind of come off as being devil's advocate, but I'm gonna say that to some degree, like, yes, that is true what you're saying,
Okay.
but I think we're more devolving than we are evolving. I mean, it could be that I'm wrong. I honestly do believe that I might be wrong because of the fact that, like you said, we are evolving to something else, but we don't know what.
Right.
And I think that's just either human evolution or whatever societal, like the way society progresses. And I do think you do make a lot of good valid points. The only reason why I personally think it might be devolving is because when I look at like the attention span aspect, for example, I mean, you look at like tutorials on YouTube and sometimes they're 14 minutes long, 20 minutes long. Granted that some of them, make could be a little bit shorter, but sometimes with a certain type of what do you call it? A certain type of subject, you do need to spend that extra time like going through everything, right? So you can't shorten a 12-minute video to like 30 seconds on a reel or a TikTok.
And it's
So
really interesting what holds your attention span too. Because like my boyfriend and I watch a lot of videos and he usually picks them out. So a lot of times they're car videos or something and I just tune them out. But then we were watching, I think they were in Africa. These people build like the mud huts where they dig up a big hole and then build their houses out of the mud. And we can sit there and watch that for an hour, just like
yeah,
paying attention to it. So I don't know what it is. Maybe it's going back to like our roots, but something so simple can hold our interest versus something like we were talking about earlier, the fast-paced movie has to have so much going on and we're still not paying attention to it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I kind of see it as like stuff like that, like what you're talking about, like the mud hut building. I mean, that could be very essential to survival, right? So, but like there's certain things like just kind of like cooking certain things, building certain things, just like changing oil and from your car. That might be something that you could probably condense into probably like 4 minutes, but it doesn't take 4 minutes when you actually do it.
Right.
So the problem with that I see, and I see this with like younger generations, because like I do talk to like my cousins, their friends and stuff like that. And I see that just because they see that it took 4 minutes in YouTube video, they somehow think that it's going to take that same amount of time. And it's like, so they get frustrated when it's like when they hit like the 4 minute, 5 minute, 6 minute mark, and it's like, I'm not done yet. I'm not even anywhere near with the video.
The onion.
Yeah, I'm still chopping the onion, trying not to cry or something, right? So it's like, yeah, and then you kind of like look at all that, and it's like, I think patience is what we're really losing, like a whole lot, like a whole lot more than anything, right?
But I feel like COVID kind of gave us a reset too. Like a lot of people are at home. I saw so many people making loaves of sourdough bread, which you have to keep alive. And so many people are getting into, they're not becoming parents as early on, but they're getting pets or they're growing plants. And so I see so many people excited that their plant has a new shoot coming off of it or something, or their garden is producing. A lot of people got into gardening last year. A lot of people are getting into kayaking, fishing, hunting, archery. So COVID was good for a lot of it was bad. It was terrible for so many reasons, but it did give us time to kind of reset as a whole community population and like get back closer to almost those survivalist tactics.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I was trying to make the point that we're to some degree devolving, but you'd make the great opposite point, which is like, yeah, we're learning a bunch of that stuff, so it kind of like destroys my argument, just kind of ripped it to shreds a little bit. And I think you are right in that sense. Like we're looking at like some of the survival skills that are now considered sports, like archery, fishing and stuff like that. It's kind of weird that they're considered sports now. When you look at like maybe 100 years ago, maybe more than that, like they were essential tools to survive.
It was for food. Like they had to do it or else they were dead.
You didn't eat. Yeah, like it's one of those things where like if you did not know how to shoot a bow or a gun, you did not eat.
Yeah, or fish.
Yeah, or fish. Yeah, exactly.
I'm so happy that I don't. I'm Norwegian, and so we had a traditional Norwegian Christmas a couple years ago, and we had lutefisk, which is like the most. Do you know what lutefisk is?
I do not.
It is a fish cooked in lye.
What?
So it comes out like fish jello.
Oh, wow.
So gross.
Why is it cooked in lye?
That's how they used to make it.
But isn't lye like poisonous though? Like
I don't know the whole process, but I know it comes out with like fish jello. And I was sitting across the table from my aunt, and she took a bite because they told everyone that we all had to try a bite. And she just her face, it pinched, and then she just spit it all out. And I was like, I'm not
dude, I mean, that's kind of interesting because like again, like so some of the things that I used to like my family used to eat when they were back in Mexico were like like organ meat, right? And now like I mean my dad's still down to eat it, but like my brothers and sisters probably not. Like in certain types of ways of cooking the organ meats, like they'll eat it, but not like me. Like I won't eat it raw, but
But in the hunter community, it's almost coming back as like the thing to do is you have to eat the heart and maybe even I don't know the other organs, like because people are on a don't waste kind of kick right now.
Exactly. That's what I was trying to get at. Like, cause I mean, when you, my parents, like when they grew up, like at least that's what they told me, like, you'd slaughter a pig, you'd use it tail to snout, and like, whatever way you can possibly think of. So I mean, it's something that I think we definitely got away from, like, as we progressed. And I think you're right, we're coming back to it, not even just hunters in general, just overall, like the food,
Field the
the
table.
yeah, feel the table, like the what is it, not the cooking community, or culinary community, like they're bringing that back as well. Like, it's not even just hunters. It's like, I mean, it's a great feeling, because again, like, there's so much nutrition in like an animal, and like at the end of the day, we go back to what we talked about earlier, is respecting nature. Like, if you're going to take an animal's life, you might as well just utilize it and not waste it, right?
Alex Templeton said one time, she's a ag farmer on Instagram, and she's one of the nicest people you will ever talk to. But she was like, us beef farmers aren't out here working cows every day in this terrible weather for you to put ketchup on your steak or something like that. And that really resonated with me. Like, good game is good game. And people, you put effort in the hunt, or someone put effort into raising that cow. And it's that understanding, like, kind of what she's doing is spreading the word on how it happens, because a lot of people do think they just show up at the grocery store and they don't know where it comes from. So it's kind of a
Yeah.
cool switch around that we're having right now.
Well, my buddy, like, I once made the mistake, because he's the one that was like, well, my buddy Garrett, he was the one that was getting me into all these outdoor activities, and we were talking about hunting one time, and I was like, oh, can you just grind the entire deer? And he's like, are you stupid? Because it's like, the back straps, right? Like, that's the most prized cut of almost any animal, right? Like, and he's like, are you seriously stupid thinking that you're gonna grind the entire animal? I'm like, well, you said parts of it are tough, so I mean, I figured grinding it would be the easiest way. It's like, this is how I know you definitely have never had any kind of hunting background whatsoever.
But so it takes a mentor, like getting your friends into hunting. And that's a huge, like, I'll bring up the R3 again. Recruiting and retaining hunters is helping them be successful. And a lot of times you can't do that on your own. It's either having an actual mentor out on the field, it's finding a good video on YouTube, or following someone on Instagram and like getting recipes from them. We just still have to learn from one another. And I think right now people are like super willing to learn. They just want to bring in all of the new things to their life.
Yep. And with that, I'm gonna probably end this with saying this, because you literally like made a good transition point, where it's like, we need to learn off of one each other, right? It goes back to, we need to learn how to actually just, live with each other. We don't necessarily have to be the best of friends. We don't necessarily have to like each other to some degree. Like, we just have to have a little bit more respect with each other and nature, and just, be a little bit less focused on ourselves, in the sense of like, we have to prevail, like, and win everything, versus like, okay, we have to kind of like coexist with a bunch of stuff. So I think, we definitely can do that. And being mentally healthy definitely will definitely contribute to that. But I personally believe so. I think that will definitely help. And obviously I do appreciate you coming on the podcast. And really quick before we end, let people know like where you want to, like where they can find you and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I'm the Archer Steph on Instagram, and I also have a Facebook page with the same username. So feel free to follow me there. I'd love to have you. So thanks so much, Al, for having me on today.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? It was a great discussion. We went a little bit over, but I think we did talk really, really well. And yeah, it was great. And maybe in the near future, I would definitely love to have you back on, and we can talk about more stuff like hunting related or whatever.
All right, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. We'll see you guys soon. Bye.